We asked you to tell us who has left you feeling ripped off. And you contacted us in your thousands, by post, email, even stopping us on the streets. And the message could not be clearer.
They're in it for what they can get. They're not in it to provide a service.
I didn't sleep. It upset me so much that I didn't sleep.
You've told us, with money tighter than ever, you need to be sure that every pound you spend is worth it.
How do I get me money back? Because I just think I'm entitled to it.
So whether it's a deliberate rip-off, a simple mistake or a catch in the small print, we'll find out why you're out of pocket and what you can do about it.
Keep asking the questions, go to the top if you have to.
We do get results. I mean, that's the interesting thing.
Your stories, your money. This is Rip Off Britain. Hello and welcome once again to Rip Off Britain, the programme that gets to the bottom of why you haven't ended up with what you thought you would for your money or indeed your time, which of course is the reason the people we'll be meeting in today's programme got in touch with us in the first place.
Because one way or another, they all feel rather let down, as indeed we often do when we end up with something that just did not live up to the hype, or even to our own expectations.
And of course, we'll also have plenty of advice so that before you hand over your money, you've done everything you can to protect it in case something does go wrong. Coming up, as insurers soak up the cost of one of the wettest summers on record, could you end up paying the price?
They're not making the money that they think they should be making. Therefore, they are going to continue to search for a reason to punish householders for wanting to protect their greatest asset.
Cash for gold. But when companies promise big money, do they always deliver?
I was offered £214 and I was angry. There was no way I would have sold the watch for that.
And we solve more of your problems on the spot at our pop-up shop.
Some parts of Britain have been hit by disastrous floods in recent years, and although they may not like it, you can understand why those people who do live in the worst affected areas may now have to pay increased insurance premiums as a result. But what if you live in an area that has never seen a proper flood in living memory, and your premiums suddenly start to soar because apparently you have got an increased risk of flooding? Well, that's exactly what happened to Nancy Healy. She just could not understand what was going on, and she asked us to investigate. And you know, it's a good job that she did, because this time it seems that her insurance company really did not know what they were talking about.
24 hours, cut off.
We're getting used to seeing images of homes underwater. Devastating floods hit parts of Britain in 2007, 2009, and again this summer. But even after the heaviest downpours, the part of Lincolnshire where Nancy Healy lives remained unscathed. In fact, it's 50 years since the area saw a flood, and there's been nothing approaching that in the decade that Nancy and her husband Phil have lived here.
It's an absolutely stunning part of the country. We found the house that we absolutely loved. We have beautiful vistas to look out, wildlife to entertain us. We walk in the countryside. We enjoy our hobbies, and we've found a beautiful way of life here.
When the couple moved into their farmhouse, they arranged their home and contents insurance through Cornhill Direct. The cover protected them for home and contents, fire and flooding.
Our first insurance policy was for £177.50. Gradually, over the years, it crept up, and I believe in 2009 it was slightly over £300, but these were all in keeping with the movement of the market.
Over the next 7 years, up to 2009, their premiums had gone up by a fairly modest £129. And in 2007, the policy was very useful when Nancy needed to make a claim for some storm damage.
The treatment we received was outstanding. They told us simply to get it repaired and paid everything very promptly. We were very pleased with the treatment we had from them.
Or at least they were, until 2 years ago, when the cost of their insurance suddenly went up from £300 to £490. Cornhill put it down to the fact that they'd reclassified the area where Nancy's house sits as a flood risk area.
We had never had any indication that this area had suddenly become an area of concern for the insurers with regard to the floods. I was astonished to begin with, and then I was angry, because it seemed that we were being punished for something that had not happened and in all likelihood was not about to happen.
Nancy paid the increased premium, but the next year brought an even bigger shock.
In 2011, we received a premium request for £737.26. We were absolutely astonished because this was a massive increase from what it had been the previous year. I spoke to them on the phone, and their insurers were unwilling to make any adjustments to this premium for any reason whatsoever.
In 2 years, Nancy's policy had gone up by 141% because of a risk that Nancy didn't believe would ever happen. So, together with her neighbours, some of whom were experiencing similar problems with their insurance companies, she hatched a plan to fight back. Through their local MP, they arranged a meeting with a man from the Environment Agency. He said they too had recently reclassified the area's risk of flood, but unlike the insurers, they downgraded it.
He came and he sat with several of my neighbours. He talked about the fact that it has not flooded in this area since 1957, and that the area is now being changed from a significant risk of flooding to a moderate risk of flooding.
Insurance companies don't have to use the Environment Agency's analysis when they set their premiums. But Nancy couldn't understand why Cornhill Direct was saying the likelihood of flooding was increasing at a time when the Environment Agency was saying the exact opposite.
The documentation from the Environment Agency proved to be of little or no use in negotiating with Cornhill Direct. They simply did not want to know that we had a government agency that could verify that this area was in no great danger of flooding.
When the insurers wouldn't budge, Nancy asked if she could reduce the premiums by taking a policy without flood cover.
They declined, and finally I asked them if it was possible to have, say, £5,000 in excess if they insured me for flooding, and they declined again. So we agreed that they were not interested in insuring my property.
Nancy eventually organised her home insurance with a local broker for just £264. But she still feels aggrieved that, as she sees it, Cornhill Direct wouldn't listen to what she was saying.
They were unwilling to look beyond what their computer screens gave them as a definition of the area and what their underwriters would permit, so that there was no leeway taken into account that this area was indeed unaffected by flooding.
We contacted Cornhill Direct to find out why they'd been so adamant that the flood risk had increased. And when we did, the story took an unexpected turn. The company agreed that Nancy's postcode wasn't in an area at high risk of flooding. And they told us that when they'd said it was, what they'd actually meant was that it was suddenly at a greater risk of subsidence because of shrinkable clay soil in the area. When we broke that news to Nancy, she was flabbergasted.
Subsidence? I was told twice it was flooding. No one ever mentioned subsidence. No one ever mentioned clay. Absolutely astonishing. I am truly amazed. I am furious, actually.
And when Nancy gets angry, she lets the whole village know.
Our decision to apply the increased premium was purely due to the subsidence risk. It's insurance risk calculated by telephone directory, isn't it?
Yeah. You've never had any subsidence.
My house hasn't subsided. Anybody's house subsided? No. Anybody's house flooded?
I've subsided, but...
Yeah, the house is okay.
And the neighbours were even more surprised to hear one explanation that the company offered for their flood risk classification. In an email to us, they said they'd been influenced by some of the local street names on Google Maps.
The River Witham passes her property, and the neighbouring roads have such names as 40-foot bank, Ferry Lane, and 15-foot drain. I think it is forgivable for making the assumption that our stance was due to flood rather than any other peril.
Cornhill Direct told us they'd adjusted the premiums after working with an external provider of geographical hazard data so they could improve the sophistication and accuracy of their pricing. And putting aside the inaccuracy of confusing flooding with subsidence, they're satisfied that from a technical underwriting perspective, the policy has performed exactly as intended. They say their premiums reflect what they believe to be the risks presented to them, and they don't increase them by any more than they have to. But But Nancy is not convinced.
I will write to Cornhill Direct and express my disappointment. I will try to find out the name of the company who has researched this area so in depth that they've discovered that this subsiding clay is everywhere. I will share all this information with as many of my neighbours as I possibly can.
It seems Cornhill may not have heard the last of Nancy. She's not persuaded that the new justification for the price hike holds any more water than the old one.
They're not making the money that they think they should be making. Therefore, they are going to continue to search for a reason to punish householders for wanting to protect their greatest asset. So, yes, I will tackle them on this, and yes, I will continue to fight, and yes, I will be as loud as possible. I'm not going away. They may think they've won, but I'm not going away.
And it's not just Nancy who's determined to tackle the seeming confusion about how insurers decide flood risk. At Rip Off Britain, we want answers too. So I went to challenge the man from the Association of British Insurers.
How do you decide who should or should not get cover for those people who live in areas that you judge to be a flood risk?
Well, insurers assess flood risk very carefully.
How carefully? What do you do?
They use a variety of methods. They use Environment Agency mapping, they use their own mapping, they use the history of flooding in that area, and they use that to assess the risk.
Are you convinced and happy that that's what all insurers do? Because we do know that there are insurance companies who do not use the advice of the Environmental Agency, and very often what they discover is at odds with what the insurance companies say.
Well, some insurance companies use their own mapping rather than Environment Agency mapping, though most of them do use Environment Agency mapping.
But if they use their own mapping, then the person who's being insured, if they've seen what the Environmental Agency has said, which doesn't put them at exactly the same risk, can presumably only assume that therefore the insurance company is using their own terms of reference to suit them and not the customer.
Insurers always want to look after the customer. They want to make sure that they cover customers who whatever risk category they're in. I think the issue you're talking about here is twofold. One is that the Environment Agency maps can be quite high level, and quite a lot of insurance companies have more sophisticated mapping. But there's also the issue as to how quickly the flood defence data comes into the Environment Agency mapping. And that can be a bit slow, and it's something we've pushed the Environment Agency for, we push government for, to get the data through faster, so that if a flood defence is put in your area, then it comes very quickly through in the mapping, and the insurance company can use that to say, right, your risk has gone down.
So can you be absolutely certain that when someone takes out an insurance policy and they are in what the insurers think is a flood risk area, that genuinely is an area that is at risk of flood and is not just something that the insurance company have just taken a postcode lottery on?
Well, insurance companies will work as hard as possible to get people on their books. They're not going to arbitrarily get rid of them. They'll have different approaches and they'll have different ways of assessing risk. It's one of the reasons it's sensible to shop around. And if you are in a flood risk area, don't just go onto a comparison website and look at it there. Go to a local broker. Brokers often understand the local risk, and they'll know the insurers who understand the risk better. That in those circumstances, that would be my advice.
Mrs. Darling, thank you.
Now, we've all seen the ads for the companies that have sprung up, offering to exchange your gold for cash. First glance, it seems a great way to earn money from any unwanted jewellery that you might just have lying around the house. But in fact, as we've reported before, it's not always the golden opportunity that's promised. Now, in the past, we've looked at how the money on offer is all too often no match whatsoever for the true value of what you're selling. But since then, you've been letting us know about another way that some of these companies can catch you out and cost you money as well. They've become an extraordinarily popular way to quickly raise cash. And it's no wonder that so many people are tempted by the dozens of companies around offering great prices for your unwanted jewellery. Because adverts like these can make you feel that you're sitting on a gold mine.
And you'll be pleasantly surprised at how much it's worth.
So why wait? Make the call or go online and turn your gold into cash today.
And that's certainly what Lisa Tate from Greenock hoped when earlier this year she started looking into selling an expensive watch which she rarely wore.
My husband bought me the watch on a holiday to Turkey 11 years ago. It's just been in my jewellery box, not really doing anything. I thought it would be nice to use the money from the watch to go on holiday with my daughter.
Lisa found an impressive-looking website for a company called the British Gold Refinery, who were promising excellent rates and first-class service.
Their website looked professional, and it stated that if I wasn't happy with their price, they would return it within 10 days, no quibbles.
To get a price quote, Lisa entered the watch's weight and carat into the website's online calculator. And she was delighted when they said that they'd pay her more than £500 for it. So happy to take up that offer, she posted off the watch. But then, after they'd received the watch in early March, the British Gold Refinery rang her up to say that, in fact, they could only pay her less than half of what they'd initially suggested.
I was offered £214 and I was angry because I felt that the website was misleading. There was no way I would have sold the watch for that.
Now, one of the reasons the company gave for the reduced offer was that they said the watch was 13 carat and not 14 carat as Lisa had said. They also claimed that the weight was wrong as well. But Lisa found all of that just hard to believe.
I know this to be the weight in carat because I've had an expert valuation done for insurance purposes in the past.
And the bad news didn't stop there. Lisa was told that if she turned down the £214 offer, that she would have to pay an administration fee for her gold to be returned, £35 plus postage and packing, all of which they said added up to £50.
I was shocked and surprised when they asked me to pay £50 to have my watch back because their website had kept saying free quotation, free valuation, free return if you're not happy with the quotation that we give you.
A £50 fee does seem a long way from the no-quibble returns that the website had promised. Lisa told the British Gold Refinery she was not happy with their offer, and although they did increase it, first to £302 and then to £350, that was a lot lower than the quote they'd given her in the first place. By now, whatever they offered her, Lisa no longer wanted to deal with the company.
I wouldn't sell my watch to the British Gold Refinery even if they offered me the full value of it. I would rather flush it down the toilet than give it to them.
Lisa found herself up against a deadline because the company told her that if within 14 days she didn't accept their final price of £350 or stump up the £50 to have her gold returned, then she would automatically be paid just the £214 they'd previously offered, and the watch would then be destroyed.
I was really worried that they were going to melt my watch down. They told me this in the emails, that if I didn't pay within 14 days it would be melted down, and for that reason I felt that I had no choice but to pay the £50.
Lisa was told that the £50 fee she'd paid to get the watch back was to cover the price of an expert valuation. So intrigued as to why that would cost so much, she asked the company to email her a copy.
Their expert valuation was worded one watch with straps, valuation £302, which works out at £10 a word. It's a complete rip-off. I could get a proper expert valuation for half that price.
In fact, she could get one for free in some jewellers. And Lisa's not the only one who feels that the promises made by the British Gold Refinery may not, in fact, have been worth their weight in gold. We've spoken to other people who feel totally let down by the company, and a search on the internet reveals numerous complaints from very unhappy customers. The British Gold Refinery told many of the customers who'd complained about the £50 administration fee that they'd paid it because they had not ticked the quote-only box on the envelope and had therefore consented to a valuation. Now, Lisa admits that that's an error she also made, but had tried to correct.
When I realised my mistake, I called them and spoke to a telephone operator who assured me that she had put a note on my account to that effect and that I wouldn't be charged the £50 admin fee, but they still charged.
Lisa says she didn't spot the administration fee because it was buried deep in the terms and conditions on the company's website, and the Advertising Standards Authority would agree with that. In January, they ruled that the British Gold Refinery should clearly display the administration fee on their website. And in fact, the company has gone further than that. After we got in touch to query Lisa's charge, they told us that they've now scrapped their return fees altogether. They say although they've always aimed to provide the best price for the gold sent to them and the best customer service, they've listened to customers and as a result, changed their policy. Anyone unhappy with a quote who wants their gold back will now get it free of charge with no return fees applied. As for the prices they offer, they believe them to be a fair estimate for the gold in the items sent. They're confident that they offer the best price in the market, and the reason these can be lower than the initial quote is because those quotes are simply a guide based on the spot price of gold. The exact prices can only be confirmed once they've received the items. Meanwhile, although Lisa did get her watch back, she's been left feeling totally frustrated by her dealings with the company.
To me, it's underhand and misleading, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen.
Well, this really is a subject that you contact us about all the time. So later on in the programme, you can see what happened when we sent some gold to the same company that Lisa did.
Still to come on Rip Off Britain, a woman who's had to pay hundreds of pounds of extra costs after buying something faulty. So why should it be her that has to pay them?
I was in a situation where I had no car and the money was starting to add up, and I started to become very stressed about how I was going to afford to pay for everything.
Rip Off Britain has come to the northeast of England. Overnight, we've created a shop where anyone can pop in to receive instant advice from our team of consumer experts.
The marvellous thing about you being quite early in the day, John, is the fact that I can take you straight to the expert.
Come on.
So come with me.
Let's go for it.
I know.
First up to see our travel expert, Simon Calder, is John. He feels badly let down by his travel insurance company after his partner had an accident on holiday in Scotland.
We got a Butte, we're out walking, she fell, broke her wrist. It involved us in taxis, trips to the mainland for x-rays. I think in total the cost came to about £135. So we put the insurance claim in, we got a letter back saying that this insurance policy does not cover us for the United Kingdom, the Channel Islands or the Isle of Man.
Here we are. Section B, emergency medical and treatment expenses. It very specifically says this section does not apply to trips within the UK, Channel Islands or Isle of Man if you live there.
What should they have done?
The advice is, unless there's a very particular reason that you would want to get insurance for a UK trip, don't bother.
Are you going to take this issue up on behalf of John?
I most certainly am. I want to find out, first of all, how they can possibly be selling insurance at that price, £55 for 5 days in Scotland. I don't know if we have legally a leg to stand on, but morally, I'm afraid this is an almighty rip-off.
Are you happy man, John?
Very much so. Brilliant. Go for it.
Our pop-up shop has certainly drawn the crowds, and our experts have been kept busy with an extraordinary range of problems.
Good heavens above! Sarah, what's the legal position here?
If nobody is offering you any financial recompense, then you may have to consider going through the courts.
Michael has been left with an expensive repair bill after his car was damaged by a pothole and wants some advice on what to do next with his claim after his local authorities' insurer refused to pay out.
They wouldn't accept a claim for damage against a third party's insurer. I didn't know where to turn next.
The difficulty here is you're not a client of the local authority's insurer, and so actually you don't have that same protection that you do if it was your own insurance policy. So there's sort of a couple of other options open to you. One of them you probably considered, which is to make a claim on your own car insurance policy. But of course, you've then got your own excess to pay. That damages your own claims record. The only other option really open to you now is to think about complaining to the local government ombudsman, and at least you'll get an independent set of eyes look over your case.
Well, I have records from the insurance company which show that the last time the road was surveyed was in February, and no survey exists for March. and the
okay.
accident was in April.
Well, that sounds like that could be a key piece of evidence, and, you know, that evidence is all stuff that should be put in your claim to the local government ombudsman. And, you know, best of luck with it. Let's hope that you get that insurer to pay out.
I'll certainly do that. Thanks very much for your advice.
Next, a case of what should have been a straightforward repair, which has not only dragged on for months, but led to hundreds of pounds of extra costs and an extraordinary amount of unnecessary hassle. Harriet Love contacted us because the company concerned had told her it wasn't down to them to put things right. But according to the experts we've spoken to, this really is a case where there's no smoke without fire. When Harriet Love's car engine packed up, she recorded the moment on camera, little realising that all that smoke was the sign of worse things to come. Harriet needs a car to ferry her 2 children around, but rather than replace her 10-year-old Vauxhall Astra, she decided to give it a new lease of life.
I got some advice from a brother who was a mechanic, and he seemed to think that it'd be very straightforward to refit a second-hand engine, and at the time it was going to be the easiest option, and I couldn't afford a new car. It was quite difficult to find a new engine with the car being so old, so I decided to go online through a company that you could get parts from. And I felt reassured by this company because they were the largest in the country, and the parts would come guaranteed.
And through that website, Harriet got a quote from a business called West Coast Car Breakers in Preston. Their own website boasts that they can supply anything from a wheel nut to an engine, and that they do it reaching new heights of efficiency. So Harriet was thrilled to discover they had the engine she needed.
It came at a reasonable price at £288, which was going to include delivery and a 30-day warranty, so I was happy with this purchase. After several weeks of not having a car, I felt very much relieved that this company was going to supply the engine very quickly and I'd be able to get myself back on the road.
West Coast Car Breakers did deliver the engine to a garage near Harriet, as promised, but something wasn't right.
The engine was fitted really quickly, but then I got a call from my local garage that had fitted the engine, saying that he was a little bit concerned that there was still some smoke coming out the back of my car, and he found that the water pump supplied with the engine was cracked and it needed replacing.
Graham Ransom, the mechanic who did the repair, is in no doubt about the equipment he'd been supplied with.
This engine wasn't fit for purpose. As soon as we put it in, it was burning oil. It was that bad. You put to the car behind. Obviously, it was the piston rings letting oil past, obviously creating the smoke and burning the oil.
So Harriet rang West Coast Car Breakers. After all, they'd sold her the engine with a 30-day warranty, but they told her that didn't cover the water pump.
They weren't very helpful, and I didn't quite understand all the terminology, so I asked my mechanic to phone up on my behalf to see if he could resolve the problem. He did this the following day, and the scrapyard agreed to send out a replacement water pump, so I was happy with the response.
But not for long. When the water pump didn't arrive, Harriet's mechanic rang West Coast Car Breakers again to see why. And this time, they returned to saying they wouldn't be replacing the part as it wasn't covered by the warranty. In a desperate attempt to get Harriet mobile again, Graham suggested trying to salvage the water pump from Harriet's old engine.
Thinking that it was going to be now straightforward, I was quite surprised when my mechanic called me again to say that the engine was still smoking quite badly, and in his opinion it needed replacing and it had been sold a bad engine.
What colour is the circle?
Harriet was becoming increasingly frustrated. She'd been without a car now for several weeks, and the problem seemed to be getting worse.
It was becoming very stressful. I was confused over what was going on, and in the meantime I had no car. It was at a garage and it costing me a lot of money, and I got 2 small children and life was becoming very difficult at home.
Harriet was fed up and she wanted her money back, and she was confident that the law was on her side. Under the Sale of Goods Act 1979, if you're sold a product with an existing fault, even if it's second-hand, and it wasn't made clear to you when you bought it, you should be entitled to a refund, repair or replacement. And the trader should also be responsible for any consequential loss. But West Coast Car Breakers didn't see things entirely the same way.
The company said that the engine would have been fully tested before it had been removed from its original car, and that they would only refund me for the cost of the engine and not all the other costs that I had incurred from fitting it and taking it out. Eventually, we agreed that I would have a refund for the engine if I removed it from the car, and they would collect it free of charge.
Though that seemed to be moving in the right direction, Harriet had to spend more money removing the engine from her car.
I arranged to rebook my car back into the garage to have the engine removed, and I contacted the scrapyard to tell them the day when it was going to be ready for collection. The scrapyard turned up the day before when the engine was still in the car, and they saw the engine working and they agreed that it was very bad, the smoke coming out the back of the car, but they left without the engine.
West Coast car breakers insisted they hadn't got the day wrong, and that as they'd now had a wasted journey, it was up to Harriet to return the engine to them. However that confusion had occurred, by now it wasn't just the car that was fuming.
This company were being very unreasonable and were not helping me in any way, despite them selling me the bad part. I was in a situation where I had no car and the money was starting to add up, and I started to become very stressed about how I was going to afford to pay for everything.
Despite spending hundreds of pounds, Harriet still didn't have a working car, and things were tough without it.
I was still without a car with an engine, which had been very stressful because of the school runs taking 3 hours a day using public transport.
We got in touch with West Coast car breakers who say they're saddened by this situation, but don't agree that they've been unhelpful in resolving it, and they stress they're not a company that acts with no regard for the customer. They point out that they offered a full refund for the engine and to collect it free of charge within an hour of being asked. However, they now say they will refund the cost of the engine without its return, and they accept that they did go to collect it on the wrong day, for which they offer their sincere apologies, and they're giving Harriet £200 in compensation. But it still doesn't seem that they're going to cover all her consequential losses. They point out that's because the terms and conditions of the website she first used to contact them makes clear these costs won't be paid. But experts we've spoken to say any terms and conditions are always trumped by the Sale of Goods Act, and that losses in cases like this should be paid. Meanwhile, Harriet felt she had no choice but to find another engine somewhere else. And of course that's cost even more money. So while she's relieved to have a working car again, she's angry that the whole business has left her so out of pocket.
Financially and emotionally, I feel completely drained from everything that I've had to do in order to get this car back on the road. And I'm in a situation where I don't feel I can move forward with this scrapyard, and I can't see an end in order to resolve this situation that I'm in.
After our last series of Rip Off Britain, many thousands of you sent in for our Rip Off Britain guide to getting a good deal. So this year we've written a new, expanded guide with practical advice on topics that are covered in this series, like PPI, cold calls and supermarket deals, as well as updated tips and information on avoiding rip-offs and how to get a better deal. You can find a link to the new free guide on our website. It's at bbc.co.uk/ripoffbritain. Or to receive a copy in the post, send a stamped, self-addressed A5 envelope to the address that we'll give you at the end of the programme. Swapping your unwanted gold for cash has become increasingly popular in recent years. And earlier in the programme we heard from Lisa, who was disappointed by her experience with the service that she'd had from the online cash for gold company, the British Gold Refinery. They gave her a quote of more than £500 for a gold watch, only to then offer less than half that amount once she'd sent it off to them.
To me, it's underhand and misleading, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen.
So was Lisa's experience a one-off? Well, we wondered what would happen if we tried to sell some, so we also sent some gold to the British Gold Refinery. Would we, as they claim, get the best price on the market? We selected 3 pieces of gold, a money clip, a bracelet and a gold chain, and went to a professional jeweller to have them weighed and the carat certified.
This piece is 14 karat gold. I've weighed it at 25.27 grams.
We also had all 3 items valued.
14 karat chain, I would give £440 for. The 9 karat gold money clip, I would give £138 for. And the bracelets with Cupid zirconias and 18 karat gold, I would give £270 for.
The jeweller offered a total of £848 for our gold. So, could we get a better offer from the British Gold Refinery? Well, in this video on the homepage of its website, the company promises top prices.
Do you want to get the most cash for your unwanted gold? If your answer is yes, you couldn't have found a better place.
And, true to that promise, they instantly seemed to beat the jeweller's valuation by quoting us more than £900 for the gold. So far, so good. And we posted the gold off to them straight away.
Our online service guarantees top gold rates.
But all hopes of a guaranteed top rate disappeared when, after they'd received our gold, the company reduced its offer by almost 2/3. They now said all that they'd pay was £335.94. One of our team rang them straight away.
You know, I was expecting over £900 really for what I've sent in.
The British Gold Refinery then upped their offer to £360, an improvement, but still over £500 less than their original quote.
As a UK leading refinery, we pride ourselves on offering market-leading payment rates.
So we called them again to see not just why the quote was now so much lower, but how they'd worked it out. For example, how they'd valued our gold bracelet.
What did the bracelet weigh? 4 grams. Right, OK.
The company claimed that our bracelet consisted of just 4 grams of gold. That's half as much as certified by our jeweller, whose valuation was based on it containing 8 grams. He also certified the gold as 18 carat. So what did the British Gold Refinery say it was?
The bracelet is 16, yeah.
2 carats less than our jeweller's certification. So what about our gold chain and the money clip?
9 carat, right.
The company said that they were both 9 carat, and though that is the same as the jeweller had said for the clip, he told us that the chain was 14 carat. We decided to decline the British Gold Refinery's offer and ask for our gold back.
It isn't what I was hoping for at all, so I'd just prefer to have them sent back if that's OK.
They promised to call us back, but the phone didn't ring. We also emailed to make sure that the company knew that we were unhappy. We were then told to contact their returns department. Over the next 3 days, we called the British Gold Refinery a further 3 times to ask for our gold back. And it was returned 5 days after we first asked. But our experience with what they offered to pay was very similar to what had happened to Lisa. So why had they initially quoted so much more than they were willing to pay? When we asked them just that, the British Gold Refinery told us that they were unable to comment without proof that our valuations were for the same items that we'd sent them. They also said their valuations are based on the scrap value of gold, not a retail, resale or insurance price, which they say may explain the discrepancies between their valuations and the ones from our jeweller, although in fact his valuations were done in exactly the same way. The company also says how much they offer takes into account their cost and profit margins, which is a usual and expected business model. And they've reiterated that the original quote is based on a guide spot price of gold, with their exact offer only confirmed once they've received the items. But none of that holds much weight with the jeweller who did our initial valuation.
Not saying that we're always going to be the best person in town, but I think a £500 differential is a huge amount to be thinking about. You've got to just get the best price you can. I find it very disturbing that they can offer such a little amount. I would have thought they may have offered maybe £100 less or something for their extra work in sending it backwards and forwards. But at 335, it just seems to be that they haven't read the gold properly.
There are plenty of other gold companies that you've told us don't pay anything like the price initially quoted. The best advice is to do what we did. Get your gold accurately weighed and valued before you send it off. And shop around so that you can be sure you are getting a fair price. You can find more information on how to sell gold safely and effectively on our website, bbc.co.uk/ripoffbritain.
Here at Rip Off Britain, we're always ready to investigate more of your stories. Confused over your bills? Trying to wade your way through never-ending small print?
We should read it, but it's not in plain English. It should be simple, ABC, very basic stuff.
Unsure what to do when you discover you've lost out and that great deal has ended up costing you money?
You get home, you get your bill, and it's like £70 when it's meant to be £35. And it's just basically, you just get ripped off, don't you?
You might have a cautionary tale of your own and want to share the mistakes you made with us so that other people don't do the same thing.
We paid them good money to act in our best interest. They didn't.
You can write to us at Rip Off Britain, BBC Key House, Media City UK, Salford, M50 2QH. Or you can send us an email to ripoffbritain@bbc.co.uk. Remember that the Rip Off team is always ready and waiting to investigate your stories. So, as we've heard today, sometimes we need to manage our own expectations before getting too excited about an offer or a promise that may not be quite as good as the website or the ads would have us believe.
But even so, when you are forking out good money, you really should expect to get what you paid for. And if you don't, then you need to make sure that you know your rights so that you know the most effective way of getting your money back.
And do think about the way you pay for things. Remember that paying by credit card will usually give you protection if something does go wrong. Well, that's all we've got time for today, but we hope you can join us next time when we'll be looking into more of your stories. Till then, from all of us, bye-bye.
Bye.